What happens when a nation that has never built a single military aircraft decides it must learn or risk everything? In 1936, Australia had no aircraft industry, no engines, no fighters, no fallback. One company was created to change that. From trainers to jet fighters to helicopters, every aircraft the Commonwealth Aircraft Corporation ever made tells one story, and it begins not with a blueprint, but an empty factory floor. Factories do not spring up overnight, and neither does self-reliance. In October 1936, the Commonwealth Aircraft Corporation was founded with a single purpose: to give Australia the power to build its own military aircraft and engines, right at home. The country's leaders, including industrialist Essington Lewis and engineer Lawrence Wackett, understood that buying planes from Britain or the United States would never be enough if war cut off supply lines. They chose Fisherman's Bend in Port Melbourne as the site for a new factory, an empty stretch of land that would become the center of Australia's aviation ambitions. The challenge was not just to make one airplane, but to prove that Australia could create a system for repeatable, large-scale production. CAC's first contracts were for the Wirraway, a trainer and general-purpose aircraft based on the North American NA-16. But this was more than a copy job. The CA-1, CA-3, CA-5, CA-7, CA-8, and CA-9 contracts each brought new batches and refinements, testing whether workers, suppliers, and engineers could deliver hundreds of aircraft to military standards. By 1944, the workforce had grown to nearly 44,000, with thousands of subcontractors, feeding parts and expertise into the Fisherman's Bend assembly lines. Every new Wirraway batch was a step in building not just airplanes, but the very idea that Australia could stand on its own industrial feet. Could a nation that had never built a military aircraft create a production line strong enough to defend itself in a world at war? Designing an airplane from scratch is a different challenge than building from someone else's plans. For the Commonwealth Aircraft Corporation, that leap began with the CA-2 and the CA-6 Wackett trainer, the first aircraft to come entirely from Australian minds and hands. The Wackett was not just a technical milestone, it was a solution to a pressing national problem. Australia needed a way to turn raw recruits into pilots, starting from zero. An ab initio trainer, as the Air Board called it, had to be steady, forgiving, and reliable, qualities that would let young Australians learn the basics of flight without fear or unnecessary risk. The Wackett's simple, rugged structure and stable handling made it the backbone of the RAAF's pilot pipeline in the early 1940s, with over 200 built at Fisherman's Bend. But the urge to design did not stop at trainers. As the war deepened, CAC's ambitions grew bolder with the CA-12, CA-13, and CA-14. The Boomerang prototypes. Here, the company set out to do what had never been done in Australia: create a homegrown fighter under the direction of Fred David, an engineer who brought experience from Europe and Asia. The Boomerang project was a crash course in indigenous innovation, pushing the team to adapt, invent, and prove that CAC could respond to national emergencies with original thinking, not just licensed production. While Lawrence Wackett remained the steady hand guiding the company, the Boomerang effort showed that Australian engineers could dream up and deliver real combat aircraft, even under the tightest deadlines. This was the turning point where CAC stopped being just a builder and started being a problem solver for Australia's defense. If a country could teach itself to design both its own trainers and fighters, what else might it be capable of? War did not wait for perfect designs. When conflict swept the Pacific, Australia's aircraft industry faced its first real test, not in a drawing office, but on the front lines. The Wirraway, originally built as a trainer, was suddenly pressed into combat roles it was never meant for. Mechanics bolted on bomb racks and fitted machine guns wherever they could. Pilots like Flight Officer James Doughty found themselves flying ground attack sorties over Port Moresby, using two 7.7mm guns and a handful of bombs to harass Japanese positions and buy time for battered ground forces. The Wirraway's strength was not its speed or firepower, but its sheer availability. In the desperate early years, it was the plane the Royal Australian Air Force could count on, flying reconnaissance, close support, and even, in rare cases, dogfights against enemy fighters. But as the stakes grew sharper, so did the need for a true fighter. With imports cut off and Japanese raids threatening the mainland, the government ordered the Commonwealth Aircraft Corporation to deliver a homegrown solution in record time. The result was the Boomerang, a fighter built on the bones of the Wirraway, but armed with two 20mm cannons and 4 machine guns, powered by a 1,200 horsepower twin Wasp engine. Engineers worked around the clock, turning out the prototype in just 16 weeks. Factory foreman Bill Eyre remembered the night shifts and the whiteboard scrawled with last-minute calculations. The Boomerang was never the fastest or highest flying machine, but it could turn tight, take punishment, and hit hard at low altitude. It became the Royal Australian Air Force's answer to jungle warfare, flying close support, marking targets for artillery, and defending forward airstrips when nothing else was available. In these moments, the purpose of the Commonwealth Aircraft Corporation became clear. Wartime urgency changed the definition of success. It was not about building the best aircraft in the world, but the right aircraft for the fight Australia faced that day. If necessity is the mother of invention, what might happen when a nation has no choice but to invent? In the closing days of World War II, CAC engineers set their sights high. The CA-15, known as the Kangaroo, was their boldest attempt to match the world's top piston fighters. Designed by Fred David's team, it promised a top speed near 730 kilometers per hour and a climb rate to rival anything in the air. The prototype took flight in 1946, just as jet engines began to reshape military aviation. The timing was unforgiving. Budget cuts and shifting priorities meant the Kangaroo never moved past a single prototype and a handful of test flights. For those who built it, the CA-15 stood as proof of how far Australian design had come and how quickly the ground could shift beneath their feet. With the war's end, the need for modern fighters remained. CAC turned to licensed production, securing rights from North American Aviation to build the P-51 Mustang, the CA-17. Mustang Mark 20 began as kits assembled in Australia, but soon led to the CA-18 Mark 21, Mark 22, and Mark 23 Mustangs built locally with Packard Merlin engines and modifications for the RAAF. The proposed CA-21 Mark 24 never left the drawing board, as priorities changed again. In total, around 120 Mustangs rolled out, forming the backbone of Australia's air defense into the jet era. Licensed production kept factories running and skills sharp, supplying the RAAF when local design alone could not. The shift from invention to adaptation was not surrender, but a way to safeguard national capability by mastering others' designs. In this moment, ambition met reality and found a way forward. Jet engines redefined military aviation, and the Commonwealth Aircraft Corporation moved quickly to keep pace. The CA-27 Avon-Sabre, first assembled in 1954, marked Australia's entry into the jet age. Built around a Rolls-Royce Avon engine and armed with twin 30mm cannons, the Avon-Sabre gave the Royal Australian Air Force a supersonic fighter that met Cold War demands and proved local industry could master jet technology. The CA-25 Winjeel, introduced in 1955, kept pilot training steady after older trainers retired. Its forgiving design and reliable 210 horsepower engine made it the backbone of basic flight instruction. The CA-30 Macchi MB-326H, built under license from Italy in the mid-1960s, became the main jet trainer and lead-in fighter for nearly 30 years. The Macchi guided pilots from propeller planes to high-speed jets, preparing them for advanced tactics and even light attack missions, a true bridge to modern air combat. In the 1970s, CAC assembled the CA-32 Kiowa, bringing rotary wing capability for observation and utility roles. Through each shift, CAC adapted to new technologies, building not just aircraft, but the foundation for Australia's evolving air power. On quiet mornings across rural New South Wales, the deep thrum of a single-engine Ceres became a familiar sound. This was not a warplane, but a lifeline for farmers, Australia's first homegrown crop duster. Built from the bones of the Wirraway, CAC's engineers took what they had learned in the urgency of war and reimagined it for peace, bitting the Ceres with a larger radial engine and a hopper that could carry more than a ton of fertilizer or seed. Only a handful were built, yet each one proved that the skills forged in military production could serve the land as well as the nation's defense. Elsewhere in the CAC story, the CA-22 and the CA-26 projects show a different kind of ambition. The CA-22, a civil liaison prototype, and the CA-26, an experimental jet, never became household names or filled squadrons. But their existence points to a company always searching for new ground, testing ideas for light transport, peacetime utility, or the next leap in technology, even when the market or the moment wasn't ready. For the pilots, farmers, and engineers who touch these machines, the value lay not in numbers, but in the proof that Australia could adapt, experiment, and serve its own needs, whatever the era demanded. How far can a nation's self-reliance reach when it's willing to reinvent its own expertise? Today, Australia relies on global aerospace giants for defense needs. But what happens to national resilience when local innovation fades? As new threats emerge, is the ability to build at home still worth fighting for? Let me know what you think in the comments below.